Welcome back to my build of this HobbyBoss Mikoyan MiG-31 Foxhound. First of all, I put down a base coat. In this tutorial, we will go through the painting process. We will look at decals. We will take a look at the pre-weathering, pre-shading, and finally, in the final reveal. So I start off by doing all the pre-shading. It's done on a black base coat with some whites. And to make it more lively, I added some yellows, some greens, and some magenta. I use a very fine needle airbrush here at a very low pressure, at about 15 psi. As you can see, I've covered it all. And then on to the yellow parts. I just simply add yellow to the pre-shading scheme. And this gives it a more lively effect. Next up is the green. And again, it's a bright green I use here, just to make sure it shows through. And finally, some magenta as well. Next is building up this gray color, and I fill in each panel one by one, slowly building up color, putting on in different layers, making sure it gets time to dry out before I put on the next coat. Making sure to get a nice even layer on every panel, so all the seam lines will stand out a bit more. And as you can see, I'm slowly building up the effect of the weathering part. And this is the result from one coat of paint. And then onto the vertical stabilizers. Repeating the process of filling in each panel one by one, slowly building up the color, and to make sure we keep the effect. Next is the bottom part of the fuselage, and it will get the exact same treatment as I did on the vertical stabilizers, filling in each panel one by one, and then slowly building up the effect. I really enjoyed this part of the painting process. It's almost like a therapeutical process. I should mention that I only use acrylics. I only use acrylic paint on my models. No lacquer-based paint at all, except from when I use Tamira's clear blue or clear orange. Those paints have a different formula than regular acrylics and needs to be thinned with lacquer thinner or IPA. Removing tape strips is one of my favorite jobs. really shows you the final reveal of the paints, and I really like that process. I wanted to make an impression that one of the panels has been replaced by a new panel, and I paint this panel in off-white or off-yellow color, and then toning it down so it matches the basic paints of a new panel. I will weather this panel further to blend in the effect a bit more. I use some stencils to make the impression of lighter parts, of lighter areas of the top coat. It has to look worn, it has to look faded, or it has to look like it's been standing in the sun for a while, so the paint has faded. I use these stencils that I bought from the internet, and it makes the job really easy to make some interesting shading effects on the top. I also added some yellow parts with acrylic paints, just to give the effect of it has been worn or it has been standing below a tree or something. Next is the decal process. And first of all, I put on some of the microsalt solution, and then add these decals from HobbyBoss, which is actually quite thick. It takes a long time for it to release from the paper, but they are actually pretty good when they first are being applied to the model. So when I've put on the microsalt, I gently brush the decal with a cotton bud, and then put on the microset solution to make the decal conform to all the panel lines. Again, starting using microset in order to get the decal to stick better to the model, and then afterwards putting on microsol. You have to be really careful not to push the decal when you've put on the microsol solution, because it gets brittle and it tends to break. And gently brushing with the microset, again to get it to conform. There is, of course, a complete sheet of various decals that I've put on off cam. And now onto the weathering part. This time I use some oil paints, heavily diluted in mineral spirits. And I start at the bottom with some brown oil paints and then put it into all the different panel lines. I don't use any of the pre-fabricated washes that you could buy from various companies or various brands. I prefer to dilute my own oil paints and use them instead. I have coated the whole plane with some gloss coat in order to lock in the decals and lock in the effect that I've done before I add the oil paints. In that way I can work with the oil paint on top of the acrylic paint without damaging the underlying paint. When dry, I gently wipe off with a cotton bud and sometimes leave a bit of the brownish color just to make it look worn, dirty. This particular airplane is not being kept very well. This has a tendency to stand out in the rain and snow, and perhaps parked under a tree or in the wide open, and they get a lot of abuse from the sun and from various weather conditions, and they get pretty beat up. So that's why I'm not worried about adding some heavy weathering on this model specifically. Usually I go very easy on the post weathering, but this time I thought that I would really get into it and weather it quite extensively. I also added some oil streaks at the bottom, left from the engines. So brown is the color I use at the bottom of the plane. When we get to the top part of the plane, I will add some green, which will give the effect of moss has attacked the plane. When I did the research on this model, I actually discovered that the external fuel tanks are positioned in the wrong way according to the kit. HobbyBoss has actually done an error in the kit displaying the external fuel tanks positioned in the innermost pylon, and that's actually wrong. When the MiG MiG-31 carries the external fuel tanks, they are actually specifically carried on the outboard wing pylons exclusively. When they carry these tanks, they are actually reducing the aircraft aerodynamics efficiency and of course also the maximum speed, so in practice they're often dropped once empty just to regain maneuverability and speed for combat. So I decided to place my wing tanks in the correct position, which is at the outboard wing pylons. The inboard pylons are typically reserved for air-to-air missiles such as the R-40 TD or twin launchers of the R-60, which is the one that I'm using in this kit. Now onto the top part of the kit, and here you can clearly see I used a green wash instead. I will come back with a brown wash on top and put it into the same panel lines just to blend in the effect. As you can see, I'm now blending some white in, just to give it a bit more pale look, like the sun has been damaging the paint. This time I use undiluted oil paints directly from the tube and then dry brushing it on, fading out the effect. And the good thing about using oil paints is that you can wipe it off with mineral spirits if you don't like the result and start over again. Now onto the final assembly. Inserting the engine cowls into the frame. Making sure they are aligned properly. Then the R60 goes on. 2 on each pylon. Adding wheels. These are actually quite nice wheels. The kit is supplied with rubber tires. These are simply super glued. And then the dirt cover goes on the front wheel. And then, as mentioned, the external fuel tanks that needs to be positioned at the outboard pylon. Onto the vertical stabilizers, again using super glue. And again, these just click on beautifully. Everything snaps together nicely. And this build is actually a real joy to build. And finally, one of my favorite things is removing the tape from the glass of the cockpits. There's some kind of red sealing on all panel lines in the cockpit that I need to paint on, and I paint them on off cam. You can see I've actually done the front glass here just to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's actually some kind of thick sealing that they use on the airplanes, specifically the MiG-31. And then all that's left is to mount the canopy hoods, and then this is the final result. This plane has been a real joy to paint, and I'm quite happy about the result. I hope you like it as well. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough of my build of this MiG-31 Foxhound. It's been a real joy to build. And I'm already looking forward to my next build. So see you next time. Bye for now.